verse 19. This very same multitude of existences arising again and again merges helplessly at the coming of night, O Partha Arjuna, and streams forth into being at the coming of day. If you look at this one way, then this verse says the exact same thing as the last verse. It describes the same activity. In 18th verse, it was said that at the coming of day, all manifest things come forth from the unmanifest, and at the coming of night, they merge in that same called the unmanifested. In this 19th verse, it is said that this very same multitude of existences arising again and again merges helplessly at the coming of night, O Partha, and streams forth into being at the coming of day. In the 18th verse, it was said that when the day of Brahmaji takes place, then all creatures become manifest, and when the night of Brahmaji takes place, then all creatures become dissolved. In this 19th verse, it is said that this process happens over and over again. The words sa eva ayam are of a lot of importance. Sa means this, eva means very same, and ayam means very. Therefore, this very same multitude of existences of this world become manifest again and again and merges helplessly at the coming of night because it is dependent on the unmanifested. When it is the night of Brahmaji, then it gets dissolved and is destroyed, and when it is the day of Brahmaji again, this multitude of existences becomes unmanifest again. Again, see, it is repetitive. The important phrase in this verse is sa eva ayam. We should understand this phrase. It refers to this very same multitude of existences arising again and again. The meaning of this is that this whole event of existence is very wondrous, and it is that much more secretive and mystic. This very same circle keeps happening over and over again. Earlier we spoke about the 4.32 million years that make up one day of Brahmaji. In one day of Brahmaji and in 4.32 million years, the whole world becomes manifest, and when night time comes from Brahmaji, then this world is destroyed. Therefore, for 4.32 million years, we are in the unmanifest, and then once again, sa eva ayam. You should underline this phrase, meaning this very same multitude of existences arising again and again. This is the very same person that we are now. This means that we are all sitting here now, reading and studying and thinking about the 8th chapter of the Gita, but do you know that so many times before now, we have studied this together? And do you know that after 4.32 million years, we're going to study this together so many times? It is certain that we're going to do this in the same position, in the same way. The same Dhruv Kshatriya will be sitting here giving a discourse, and the same people will be sitting there listening to it. In the same way, all of this will keep happening again and again and again. It is repetitive, and it must have happened so many times before today. Look how much we are entering the field of secrets, that there are certain concepts which are beyond our imagination and cannot come within the grasp of our mind and our intellect. Looking at 4.32 million years is a humongous task. Only we know how 70 years, 80 years or 100 years of our lives have been spent. But what about 4.32 million years? During this time we become manifest again and again and again. This very same multitude of existences arises again and again and again. That is why this multitude of existences becomes manifest during this day of Brahmaji and becomes dissolved again during the night of Brahmaji. This is just one day of Brahmaji. Then when the second day of Brahmaji comes, then we all have to come back again, and when the second night of Brahmaji comes, then we all have to depart again. In this way, 360 days of Brahmaji takes place, and therefore 1 year of Brahmaji takes place, and when 100 such years takes place, then after one Brahma finishes, another Brahma comes. And this is how the cycle works. It works endlessly. That is why even after attaining Brahma-lok, the room of Brahma, there is no peace. God said in the 16th verse of this chapter that Abrahma bhuvana loka punarvartina Arjuna. From the realm of Brahma downwards, all worlds are subject to return to rebirth. All of these worlds are subject to return to rebirth, and there is no peace here. Then this very same multitude of existences merges helplessly with the coming of night. The word paliyate is used. How do they merge and get dissolved? The Subala Upanishad explains this very beautifully. Srimad Ramanujacharya has referred to this in his commentary. Prithvi asu paliyate apaha tejasi liyante iti adikramena anyakta akshara tamaha prayantam me eva paliyante. the earth gets dissolved into water, water will get dissolved into fire, then in the end, all of these cycles that are running will be dissolved into the unmanifest and the greatest of the imperishable, that is me. I imagine of disillusion is such that a big flood will come, and because the earth was manifest from the sea will take over the entire earth. We think on such a small level about the global earth, but Shri Krishna is speaking here about the whole of creation and the whole of the universe. The word Bhutagrama is used referring to the whole world. The earth gets dissolved into water. Water will get dissolved into fire by becoming boiled into steam. If you have placed water and it is being heated, then this heat turns water into steam and makes it evaporate. Therefore, where did the water go? It went into the fire. The solid matter of earth will go into water by becoming liquid, and then that liquid water will turn into steam because of heat and fire. And after these cycles run and run, the Supreme Soul says that at the end, all of these will dissolve into Him. In the above verse on the Subha Upanishad, the word Akshara Tamaha is used meaning the greatest of the imperishable. It is written in a superlative degree. Akshara means imperishable. Akshara Tara means greater than that is the imperishable. And Akshara Tamaha means the greatest of the imperishables. The Supreme Soul says that He is Akshara Tamaha, the greatest of the imperishables, and that all of these existences would dissolve into Him at the end. Everything will be dissolved into the Supreme Soul. This is the rule of the world. The word Bhutagrama, multitude of existences, is used. Srimad Adi Shankaracharya says while commentating that Bhutagrama means that this multitude of existences keeps coming again and again in many ages and becomes dissolved again in nobody else but God. Stavar Jangam Lakshaya Yaha Durvasim Kalpe Asit Sa Eva Ayam Nanyaha. Shankaracharya is saying that what I began speaking about earlier, you can do the nomenclature of the word kalpe in any way relating to time, calling it an age, or aeon, etc. And Shankaracharya writes that not anyone else but God. This is the difference between Western thought and Indian thought, or if I were to broaden it, then Eastern thinking. Eastern thinking is cyclic and of a circular form. This is written very clearly in the Gita, Bhutva Bhutva Praliyate, arising again and again. And if you think about it a little, then you see that it is a rule of the world that everything that is there in this world is of a circular form. At the beginning of the day, the sun rises, midday comes, evening comes, nighttime happens, the sun rises again, midday happens, evening comes, nighttime happens, and the sun rises again. It is of a circular form. Even in the year, the seasons are of a circular form. There is winter, summer, and then the monsoon season. Then it is winter again, summer again, and then the monsoon season starts again. It is of a circular form. The West believes that time is linear. They say that it goes in one straight line. The difference between the two is that if time were going in a straight line, then this would mean that those events that have taken place can never take place again. This is what must happen if time is linear. This is because if there is a straight line, then it must be such that it does not go back to where it came from. But if there is a circular form, then this means that the same events will take place over and over again. Because the West considers time to be linear and in a straight line, what has happened is that history was written. Then these people say that history repeats itself. But they wrote history for the reason that they believe that because something has happened already, it should not happen again, and therefore they should write it down. We take photographs of young children because these are photographs are history and photo albums are history. The word itihas, history, can be split into iti, meaning this, ha, way, and asa, happen, meaning it happened in this way. This is itihas, history. Many people take photographs of children when they are born. When the child turns 1 week of age, then they take photographs. When a child turns 1 month of age, then there are photographs, etc. They keep doing this. Then the more birthdays of the child that come every year, they take photographs of this to make a whole album. They say to the child that, look child, what you used to look like. The reason for this, they are saying that, child, you're not going to become 1 year of age in this body in this life like you were before. They accepted this, and that is why they've kept those memories. In the same way, the West says that that which has happened before in time will not happen again. One who feels like this begins to write history. This is the thinking of the West. Us Indians have not written history. We have written everything, but we did not write history. Why did we not write history? This is the very reason for this. We believe that this has happened many times over and over again, and who knows how many more times it is going to happen again. What is the need to write all of this? This is one thing. Secondly, thinkers explain it very beautifully that something arose that is very famous. Valmiki Ji wrote the Ramayana before the birth of Sri Ramchandra Ji. Such an event has not taken place anywhere else in the world. It only happened in India. Valmiki Ji had written the Ramayana before the birth of Sri Ramchandra Ji. People find it strange how this can happen. We believe he wrote it. Just like people write novels, it was written. It is also believed that Sri Ramchandra Ji was born because people know that at 12 p.m. at midday on the 9th day of the Shukla Paksha in the Chaitra month, Sri Ramchandra Ji was born in Ayodhya. We also believe this. But can his whole life go according to the scripture? This means that either Ram knew that this was written about him, and he could have read what Valmiki wrote in his book and acted accordingly. This is beyond comprehensible. This does not seem logical. How can it happen like this? We can understand up until the point that he was born, but how can the rest of his life work out like this? Fine, Ram himself can live his life according to this, but how can the whole world run like this? Could Ravan look at what was written about him in the Ramayana, take the disguise of a Brahmin and go and see Sitaji in the forest and kidnap her so Ram can come and kill him? One person can live his life according to this, but how can the whole world live like this? Think about this. What these people do is that they say that the whole story is wrong, and that Valmiki did not write the Ramayana before the birth of Ram, and that he must have written it after Sri Ramchandra Ji's life. This is one claim that they make. Or they try and prove both wrong by claiming that Ram was never born, and that this is the imagination of Valmiki which people are holding on to, and believing it is true that Ram was incarnation. This is the second thing that these people have to do. But how can they accept both truths? They can accept both truths if they can understand time in its correct context through this verse of the Gita. The reason for this is that, first of all, it has come early in this chapter that the soul is all-knowing. Kavim Puranam Anushasitaram. He who meditates on the seer, the ancient. The soul is the Kavim, the seer, and Gnani, wise. If at a fortunate moment a person reaches the all-knowing nature of the soul, where the entire history of the world opens up before him, and he becomes a Digga Gnani, a knower of the past, the present, and the future, then in the same way, Valmiki Ji gets the vision that in the last time cycle, so-and-so happened. The description is there. If you read the Valmiki Ramayana and see at the beginning of the Bhagavad, Valmiki Ji asks Rishi Narad that, I wish to write such a scripture about such a person living in the present, who is dharmic, who is valorous, who walks on the path of truth, or from whose life thousands or millions of people get inspiration. Is there such a person? I wish to know about him. Gunismin Sapotam Loke. And Araji said, Ramo Ramachanay Shrutaha. Yes, there is. He is Ram. You should write about him. And Valmiki Ji wrote about Sri Ramchandra Ji. Therefore, Naraji resides everywhere in all the Yuga ages, and Naraji can see everywhere. Such a Naraji gave inspiration to Valmiki Ji and gave his message to Valmiki Ji, and Valmiki Ji wrote the scripture. And I would go further to say that why only Sri Ramchandra Ji? This can happen with everyone. If we make our lives great that society can get guidance from it, then the poet in the future may get the inspiration that this is a life from which people can get inspiration. Let me write about this life. This can happen. If we can accept the circular movement of time, then everything is possible. We come into every Yuga age, and we come into every cult cycle over and over again, and dissolve Palita, which is also God's Leela, divine game, because the same God who creates also dissolves. And only Indian rishis have been able to say this with courage. If you look at everywhere else, then they all believe that God gives birth and creates, but they say that this demon dissolves the world, for example, an evil power or evil force. No, the rishis say that God dissolves as well. This is because if God creates and maintains, and the devil comes and destroys, then this means that the devil is more powerful than God. If God has given birth to something and has maintained something, and the devil comes and destroys it, then how can you say that God is all powerful? If I am sitting on a beach and making a nice sandcastle, and someone comes and breaks it with their foot, then can I not do anything about it? This means that the person who broke my sandcastle is more powerful than me. This is because I am making a house after 2 hours of efforts, whereas this person just comes and breaks my house. In the same way, if God gives birth to beings and maintains their lives for 800 years, and this devil comes in one moment and destroys this house, destroys this person, then this would mean that the devil is more powerful. The rishis say that there is no such thing as a devil, and there is no such thing as an evil force. The Supreme Soul gives death, and death is a leela, a divine game of the Supreme Soul. And this is a rule. I say as a joke, if a cricket match is going on and a batsman come from the pavilion to play, and its opening partnership of batsmen never get out and keep playing for the whole 5 days of a test match, then on the first day people say, wow, this partnership lasted. On the second day, people admire that the partnership lasted. And on the third day, people will stop coming to the stadium at lunchtime because this match is going to be a draw. If 1 or 2 wickets fell, then there would be fun. It is the same as life, where if we remain stuck onto it, then there's no fun in it. There's only fun if a wicket falls in life. It should fall because it is a sport and it is a leela, a divine game. I say as a joke that if there was no death, then each and every house would become a museum. I have great respect and love for elders, so please don't take this in the wrong way. Whenever you go to somebody's house, it will just be full of people. It will be completely full of old people. We would see a very old person sitting in a corner, and if we ask someone who this is, they would scratch their heads and say, if I have not forgotten, then this is my great-grandfather of 45 generations ago. This is because nobody would be dying. Death is necessary, and it is the Supreme Soul who gives death. This is because he knows that you would be given another birth after death. Only he who gives birth can give death. The Supreme Soul can give death because he has the power to give birth, and that is why the Supreme Soul is all-powerful. Because the word Bhutagama comes here, meaning multitude of existences, if we think about it a little, then the question will arise in our minds that if we have come into this cycle, then can we not have attained liberation? Otherwise this would mean that we come into every cycle, live the same life, do the same thing every day, and in this play of this grand world, it is a play, just like in a play where there are hundreds of showings, 150 showings, and in each and every show the same sets are made, and people wear the same clothes. If one person is shot and a balloon bursts to cover him with red liquid, then in the next show he comes in with a new bubble. Does this not happen? Many same shows take place. In the same way, during the plays that are being shown and the Kalpa cycles, Chatuyug 4 cycles, Mahayug, their ages, or Day of Brahmaji that take place according to calculations, we saw earlier 4.32 billion years, we performed this play so many times. This happens over and over again. Then what is the route to get out of this? Does this mean that we do not get out of this? Do we have to keep performing this play? No, there is a way to get out. And this question begins a unique analysis. The word avashara, helplessly, is used in this verse to show dependence, but where does this dependence go up until, and where does independence begin? The Bhutagama, multitude of existences, are fragments of the Supreme Soul. They become manifest from the Supreme Soul. They are part of the Lord. And that is why the more imperishable that the Supreme Soul is, all creatures including us that are that much imperishable. We are all eternal. That is why we keep coming back. We are imperishable. But by this individual soul mistakenly considers itself to have a relationship with Prakriti, nature, this is what it believes. And while this mistake is there is this unreal world. While this mistake is there, we have to keep coming back over and over again. The unusual thing is that with whether we are considered to be our relations in the mature world, those people who are relations go away, but the relationship does not go away. Let us think about this sentence a little. In a mature world, whoever we consider ourselves to have relationships with, the person who is a relation goes away, but the relationship does not go away. First, I will give an example from the everyday world, then I will go on to spirituality. There is a father and a son. It is a relationship in the mature world. Now consider that the father's 100 years finish, and the father passes away. The person who is a relative went far away, but has that relationship healed from the perspective of the son? No. Otherwise, has society forgotten that relationship? Did they say that now your father is gone and you no longer had a father? No. The person who was a relation and the person who was a father went away, and yet despite that, the relationship between the father and the son stays there. The son still places the photo of the father in the house, places a garden over him, lights lamps around him, and does everything for the purposes of worship of Shabda, worship of the ancestors. The person who had a relationship with has gone, yet the relationship has stayed. This is a very everyday example. Now, what I particularly want to explain from a spiritual perspective is that in the same way, what happens in the world is that leaving aside people's relations, if a person has a relationship with objects, and objects include the body, the senses, the life breath, the mind, the intellect, and considers himself to have a relationship with all of these. This is the belief that we have. The scriptures say that this is our mistake. We think that this body is ours. We think that this body is mine, and therefore we tie a relationship with it. Is this body our relation? If a feeling of minus comes, then this relationship is made. We become related to this body. This object of relation goes because the body goes away, yet the individual soul keeps thinking about how he can get a body again. Therefore, the relationship lasts. The hunger of the individual, this wish of the individual, this desire of the individual, and this faster mental impression of the individual remains. And that is why people get rebirth. The person or object of the relation goes away, yet the relationship lasts. While the individual soul himself does not have this relation, during that time, no power in the world, no matter how wise a guru he has, no matter how austere a saint he finds, or if there is any other person, can make the individual soul leave his relationship with a person or object of relation until the individual soul himself is not ready to leave that relationship. And the moment when the individual soul himself leaves that relationship, then no matter how ignorant, material, or voluptuous a person there is in the world, such a person cannot make the individual soul tie a relationship with that relation again. The individual soul has independence in the choice of leaving the relationship, and yet despite this, he does not leave the relationship. We have reached a point that is worth thinking about a lot. The individual soul has independence in the choice of leaving the relationship, and yet despite this, he does not leave the relationship. And the individual soul is dependent in holding on to relationships, yet it keeps holding on to relationships. Holding on to relationships is slavery, yet despite this, the individual soul holds on to these relationships because of Maya, illusion. And the individual soul has independence in leaving relationships, yet the individual soul does not leave those relationships. Spiritualists say that because of this muddling up, rebirth and death take place over and over again. Individual souls have independence in leaving relationships, yet become dependent in holding on to relationships. For example, when childhood came, we tied a relationship with childhood. The child liked childhood very much and did not want it to go away. It wanted to keep playing with toys all the time. But the childhood leaves the child. Therefore, is the child not dependent in holding on to it? It is, and there is no independence in holding on to it. Childhood goes and youth comes. Then the youth thinks that childhood went, but it does not matter because youth has come. Now the boy does not want to leave his youth. Yet despite this, youth goes. It is not in your hands. At the age of 35 or 40, when a person is sitting in front of a mirror and sees the first white hair on his head, then they get so much pain that how has this come? Youth will have to go. Is it in our hands? Can we hold on to it? No. Therefore, the relationship that we have tied with youth leads to slavery. Now, if we were in reality the owners, then slavery should not have come. We wanted our childhood to stay, and then we wanted our youth to stay. If I were to go further, then I would say that the relationship we have with the body, we are dependent on it. We wanted the body to remain. Did any of us have a wish that we would leave the body? Nobody has this. There is not a single person in the world that wishes to leave the body. And yet despite this, each and every person has to go and leave their bodies. This is an ultimate reality. There is dependence in tying relationships, and there is independence in leaving relationships, yet people keep tying and tying and tying relationships and keep creating newer and newer torturous flows of slavery. No matter how many wishes there are to keep relationships, despite this, relationships do not remain, and this is everybody's experience. What does the individual soul do? It keeps making efforts to hold on to relationships with objects. That is why it needs to keep taking birth over and over again. And by objects, I mean a very wide term that means not only items, but the body, which is also an object. The body has been made from the 5 great elements of earth, water, fire, wind, and ether, and that is why it is an object. The relationship with objects is temporary, yet we always make efforts to make it permanent. We are such that if we are living for 11 months under a leave license, where we are paying rent, and as soon as the 11 months finish, we keep going to the landlord and try to extend our stay and increase the length of the contract by another 11 months and another 11 months. We just do not want to leave the room. How much will you do? That room is not yours. There is a bhajan, divine song that says, Tare revu bhare na makan ma. You live in a house where you pay rent. One should have the attitude that this house is not mine. If a person has kept good relations with the landlord, then the landlord will extend the term, and so after he extends it for one time, how many more times will he be able to get it extended? The landlord has not bought the house for you, the landlord has bought the house for himself. The word baliyate, to dissolve, applies to perishable objects, they are going to perish. Because of having the wish for a relationship with these objects over and over again, this very same multitude of existences arises again and again and again. Therefore, when the objects are destroyed, then the same happens to this person. Why are they then helpless? If it is clear, then why do we not understand? If it is so clear, then why do we not understand? There is avasharata, helplessness in this. What is this avasharata, helplessness? What is this dependency and what is this bondage? The more that the individual soul makes efforts to become the owner of the body, of objects and of the material world, then the more that the individual soul becomes dependent, and the more that the individual soul becomes a slave. This is the rule of the material world. The more that you make efforts in order to become an owner, then the more that your slavery will increase. A great saint was giving a discourse on bondage. One person did not understand and just kept on asking questions. The great saint told him that he had explained to him all that he needed to be explained, and that he cannot explain it to him through any more further examples, but that he was in the town for about 7 more days, and if such an event comes up, then he would explain it to him. But the person kept on asking why people have bondage. One day this man was going to the farm with his bull. He had tied the rope around the bull's neck, and he was holding the other end with a rope in his hand. The great saint saw that he was going. The great saint went up to him and asked him, "You are taking the bull to the farm having tied the bull, but who has tied whom?" The man said, "You have told me yourself that I tied the bull, I am the owner of the bull, and I am taking the bull to drink water." The great saint began laughing out loud. The person said that this is remarkable. What is there to laugh in this? The bull is mine and I am taking it to drink water. Why are you laughing about this? The saint said, "To me it looks as if the bull is taking you for a walk." The person said, "How can this bull be taking me for a walk?" The saint said that this is so. The person asked how this was so. The saint said, "Let go of the rope." The person said, "How can I let go of the rope? If I let go of the rope, then the bull will begin running how it wants, and I'll have to run behind it to catch it." The saint said, in the same way, it is the same state when this rope is being held. You are not taking the bull is taking you. You consider yourself to be the owner of the bull, whereas you must be thinking about how you have to follow it wherever it goes, and that you have no freedom of your own. Who then is the owner in reality, you or the bull? The more that we make efforts in order to become an owner, then the more that our dependence increases. If you have met many owners, then you should ask them, so that you see how many people regarded as owners from the perspective of the world are really dependent. Dependence increases with the feeling of ownership. In the same way, one has to attain a body because the body is needed in order to fulfill all the wishes that a person has. A person has to become born because a person has become born, he has to perform karmas, and because he has performed karmas, he has to get the fruits of karmas, and he has to experience those fruits. In this way, the cycle of birth begins. The cycle of births begins. Now one does not get the wisdom of the supreme truth, and the individual soul does not leave this relationship with Prakriti nature. During that time there is dependency and helplessness, and because of this he does not become free from the cycle of births and deaths. If we look at it from another meaning, then what is the helplessness? He has created this helplessness himself. While the individual soul and the pure Prakriti Atma, the subtle self, which I spoke about earlier in this chapter, that is a fragment of the Supreme Soul, has an exaltation of happiness from union with the objects of Prakriti nature and of the material world, which is happiness from union according to the language of spirituality. During that time he keeps experiencing dependency. This is because now his happiness is dependent upon union with something, be it an object, a person, a situation, etc., and therefore slavery has come to him. He thinks that I will become happy when I attain this thing. I will become happy when I attain this person. And therefore this means he is not happy when he is amongst other people, because he is only happy when he attains one person, and that all other objects are useless because he only wants one object. If he thinks that I only become happy when I get this watch, then this means that all of this, be it clothes or other objects, are all useless because he is unhappy while he does not have the watch. Therefore everything else becomes useless for him. This is such a big dependence, and human beings have given rise to this themselves. A human being becomes stuck in bondage, is created by himself, and then the individual thinks that it's very difficult to leave these bondages. This is the very name of avashtaha, helplessness. The human being himself creates knots everywhere around him. Many times this happens. I know about this because it happened to me, that when we were young we used to wear pajamas before going to sleep, and these pajamas would have laces to tie them. The child does not know how to tie the knot properly and equally. Once he has tied the knots, then the two knots have become very tight. Therefore, when he goes to the bathroom in the morning, then he is unable to untie it. So many difficulties are created. Then he begins screaming for someone to untie it for him. But he has created these bondages himself. And we ourselves are unable to let go of this. It is fine at this time during this time of childhood, but if you look at this world, then it is the state of every being in this world that they create bondages themselves, and now they are screaming for someone to untie them. They do not become untied. When do they become untied? It is by remembering how you tied the knot, so that if you go in opposite direction to that, then it will become released. But when people create knots of bondage, they do not realize that these knots are being created. They do not realize that they would have to release these again, and that is why they would not be released easily. This is avashtaha, helplessness. At the time of tying relationships, we are not awake about the fact that we would eventually have to leave those relationships, and this is avashtaha. If a person knew at the time of tying knots that they would have to untie them later, then they would immediately become untied. But people do not know at the time of tying knots that they will have to untie them again. In the same way, at the time of tying relationships with objects, with people, with circumstances in the body, human beings forget that they will have to leave them again. Therefore, one should tie a knot in such a way that they can easily untie them later. This is a principle for any person who wishes to attain liberation. In every relationship, they should tie a knot in such a way that they can easily untie them later, so that as soon as they pull one string, then they are free. Only then will happiness come in life. Otherwise, this is avashtata, helplessness. Many people think that God has made us dependent, but God has not made us dependent. We have made ourselves dependent. Once one has wisdom of this truth that I have created bondages, I have created all these knots, and I have to untie them, then one attains the supreme truth. And as Shri Krishna will say in the second verse of the 14th chapter of the Gita, Sarge api no pachayante palayena vyatanicha. They are not born at the time of creation, nor they are disturbed at the time of disillusion. The word sarge, creation, is another word for kalpa, cycle. A person who has this wisdom is not born at the time of creation. This means that if one of us attains this wisdom and he begins to get released from bondages, then when this day of Brahmaji finishes, the time of disillusion comes at night, and then the next day of Brahmaji finishes, then that place will be empty. What I mean to say is that this is possible. We have created avashta, helplessness ourselves, but when we get wisdom, then we do not have to come back again. Sarge api no pachayante payavyanticha. They are not born at the time of creation, nor are they disturbed at the time of disillusion. And when one has the wisdom, then they are not disturbed at the time of disillusion. They have no worries even if disillusion happens, because this is their last disillusion. If I were to say in other words, if a person has been working in one office for 40 years, where he began at the age of 20 and is retiring at the age of 60, then when it is his last day on the 31st, because he is a very nice person and a very joyous person, and he has formed strong friendships with his colleagues and has won the love of his colleagues give a party on his last day and give him a gift. He goes. He has decided that he is going to what he's going to do after he retires, and he realizes that Vot Nacho Gopal, he's danced around a lot in his life, and now it is time for him to go. The next day at work, where the office starts at 9 a.m., that seat is empty. Otherwise it was repetitive, and he would have to come in at 9 a.m. to sit down, and he would leave at 5 p.m. But although he came today prepared and ready, he does not have to come in at 9 a.m. the next day. Such a person attains liberation. Sarge api no pachayante parayanavanti cha. They are not born at the time of creation, nor are they disturbed at the time of dissolution. How does this fear of death go away? Is there such a place where the fear of death no longer remains? Yes, there is such a place. And that place is described in the 3 verses that are the 20th, 21st, and 22nd verses. Let us take the 20th verse first.